It is a great honor for me to welcome Dr. Tsai and her delegation to Washington, D.C. We await your participation, Dr. Tsai, in these forums with great anticipation. Dr. Tsai, we thank you for the vision you have already shown for Taiwan's future. And of course, we look forward to welcoming you back as President of Taiwan in the near future. So to the podium, please, Dr. Tsai. The floor is yours.
So Tsai took a trip to the States and stopped by Washington, D.C. and Boston. In this video from Harvard, in the description, it says, Dr. Tsai graduated from the College of Law at the National Taiwan University in 1978 and received a LLM from Cornell University Law School in 1980. She has a PhD from London School of Economics in 1984. The key sentence in this description is, she has a PhD from the London School of Economics in 1984. But is this really true?
So thank you, Dr. Tsai, for your inspirational speech. As a next generation, I would like to know what advice you will give for Taiwanese students to face a new China with the second largest economy. And on the other hand, what advice you will give for future Chinese students to face a new Taiwan with a common value of freedom and democracy. Thank you very much.
Advice to young students, Taiwanese young students. And of course, first thing is that you have to get your degree first. Be a good student, but a rebellious one. And of course, be a good person. And third thing is that you need to have that sort of interdisciplinary. Sorry, I have had this problem pronouncing that word since my student days.
Well, you said be rebellious. You didn't talk about discipline.
I hate that word. But when I was a student at the London School of Economics, this is the word I was taught, that is trying to be interdisciplinary as possible. I didn't think about a career as a politician when I was young. No, I started as a professor.
It's a good job.
Then a negotiator, trade negotiator. I worked with government in trade negotiations. When I was talking about 10-year policy platform, I thought nobody wants to listen to me because I talk like a professor.
So we know now that Tsai Ing-wen most likely did not complete her PhD at LSE in 1984, yet she's advising students here that the first thing they need to do is finish their degree. So she likes to refer to herself as a professor. Don't professors need PhDs in order to be called professors? She goes on to have a career in government doing trade negotiations, but we will see later on that she can't even remember the name of her PhD thesis, which is about trade negotiations. Given the amount of time it takes to write a PhD thesis, you would assume that if it was real, she would remember the title of it.
So, should I say I'm not supposed to answer hypotheticals?
That's for professors. Yes.
My question is that what would the DPP do if and when the KMT loses the upcoming presidential election and declines to accept defeat? They did that in 2004 when Chen Shui-bian was re-elected and when they were out of power. And it's a distinct possibility that they would do it again now that they're in power. And what's even worse is that the PRC might intervene and might help the KMT. So my question is that what would the DPP do deal with such a disastrous situation?
Well, people talk about this possibility.
Isn't that hypothetical?
This time it's possibility, okay?
Oh, possibility.
Yeah.
Right.
Hypotheticals are different from possibilities.
Yeah. I'm just not a lawyer.
I am a politician.
So the person asking the question is referring to the 2004 presidential election, which he believes that the KMT unjustly accused of being rigged and would not concede the election. Tsai Ing-wen's response to this is that the KMT will do the same if it loses in 2012. I've already pointed out in my earlier documentary, I Love Taiwan, that the 2004 election was in fact actually rigged. The KMT did not falsely accuse the Chen Shui-bian administration of committing election fraud or staging the assassination attempt. The assassination attempt on March 19th was in fact staged. Looking back at this seminar in 2011 and seeing Tsai Ing-wen's response to the KMT potentially not conceding an election was foreshadowing for the 2020 election. She's basically saying that one day the KMT will lose and they won't concede. In other words, denying the fact that the DPP commits election fraud. She's denying that she will commit election fraud in the future. However, she did commit election fraud to get herself reelected in 2020, but opposition candidate Han Kuo-yu and the KMT party did not contest the election.
Bonnie Glazer. I'm a senior advisor for Asia at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. And it is my pleasure, as well as distinct honor, to be hosting today Dr. Tsai Ing-wen.
Thank you, Bonnie, for your introduction, and my thanks also goes to CSIS for welcoming me into this magnificent new building. As noted by some prominent international organizations, freedom of speech, freedom of press, and human rights have been on a steady decline in the last few years. In March last year, the undemocratic nature of the ratification process over a cross-trade agreement unleashed formidable social forces trying to redirect the path of the government.
So she's saying that freedom of speech and freedom of press are on the decline in Taiwan. In 2015, well, we've seen her use the Anti-Infiltration Act, which she passed in late 2019, and the Social Order Maintenance Act to stifle freedom of speech. She's also denied Zhongtian CTI their license renewal. All of the media are faking opinion polls on her behalf since June 2019. If freedom of speech, freedom of press, and human rights were on a downturn in 2015, I'd say they're nowhere existent in 2020.
Last, but most importantly, I will also strengthen our democratic institutions and uphold the rights of the people to decide their future free of coercion.
She says she will strengthen democratic institutions to protect the people's right to self-determination, yet she puts Lee Jin-yong into the Central Election Commission once it's clear that she can no longer be re-elected. She didn't give people the right to choose their own president in 2020. She essentially disenfranchised the voters.
We in Taiwan are immensely proud of our democracy and cherish our hard-earned social and political rights and individual freedom. With this new Asian value, we're ready to light up Taiwan, light up Asia. Thank you very much.
Dr. Tsai, welcome to Washington. So we're going to begin with just some conversation between us. In your speech, you had some very good words about how to perfect the democracy in Taiwan. And I think the fact is that we all celebrate this open, free, and fair elections. And as you pointed out, we're now heading into a set of circumstances where that is almost taken for granted. I think it's undeniable that Taiwan is one of the most deeply divided societies in Asia. How would you recommend going about addressing some of these very profound divisions between the parties and the people in a way that leads to a more unified identity?
Well, I think the first and most important thing is that the government has to be prepared to be open and transparent. The public need to be given an opportunity to participate in the decision-making process as well.
She constantly claims that she'll be a democratic leader and that she'll leave things open for discussion with the public. However, earlier this year, on August 28th, Taiwan used an executive order to bring in pork with ractopamine from the United States. She left no room for discussion with the opposition party or the public. She simply said that this would help Taiwan's credibility as a trade partner with the U.S. As we learned later on, this was done possibly to help Donald Trump get reelected on November 3rd in certain key states like North Carolina.
This is your second time running for the presidency. What did you take from your last campaign? What would you do differently? What will you do differently?
And as a result, we are building this sort of trust that we need when we run a government. So I think this time we stand a better chance to win.
Got to be optimistic in politics, if there's one thing we know about that.
Given that the DPP won local elections in 2014, she was fairly confident about winning the 2016 presidential election. She was ahead in the opinion polls. However, by 2019, she would need to fake these opinion polls in order to give the perception that she was going to win again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tsai, Dr. Campbell, for a really terrific discussion.
I want to make the legislative process more sensible by being cooperative. And thirdly, I want to have good communication with the public. I want to make my intention known to the public and listen to what they have to say about particular policies so that I will have a good support from the society in general.
As we saw in the legislature, she just kind of rams through whatever she wants. Whether it's appointing her own man as the Central Election Commission head who was not neutral, or rushing through the Anti-Infiltration Act just before the presidential election, she just does what she wants in the legislative yuan with the DPP's majority. As we have already stated, she couldn't care less about what the public really thinks about issues. She disregarded public opinion on the labor law reforms for 2 years before losing local elections in 2018, which forced her to step down as DPP chairman.
Thanks for your speech and your discussion. Jennifer Chen, reporter with Shenzhen Media Group, China. You said you will maintain the status quo in the cross-strait relationship. Does the status quo including admitting the 1992 consensus, like Ma Ying-jeou did, and Taiwan's current authority declares its support of one China principle? What's your position on that? Thank you so much.
Thank you for that question. I think my speech has anticipated that question. So I think I have answered all the questions in my speech. If you don't mind, you can go back and read that more carefully.
After listening to her speech, I don't recall her referring to the 1992 consensus directly. She basically dodged this question and claimed she already answered it.
Stable cross-strait relations on the basis of the existing constitutional arrangement. Now, you're a lawyer, and I'm sure you use those words carefully. What did you mean by them?
The term I use is existing constitutional order. I have to, okay, I'll give you a professor's answer to the definition of that term, constitutional order.
Once again, she likes to fancy herself as a professor, but was she really qualified to be a professor all those years?
Thank you, Chairwoman Tsai. I'm Rita Chen from Central News Agency. Sorry about that. I need to ask regarding the 1992 consensus again, because I don't hear that you mentioned about the 1992 consensus during your speech. I just wonder, how will you maintain the status quo? And does DPP accept the 1992 consensus? If you DPP doesn't accept the 1992 consensus, what is your plan A or plan B to replace it? Yeah, thank you.
Well, again, let me suggest you to go back and read my speech very carefully. It was the points I was trying to make in my speech. So, please.
Nice to see you, Dr. Tsai. I'm Zhong Hotao, a visiting fellow in SAS Johns Hopkins University. And my question is, what's the relationship between your statement of maintaining the cross-strait status quo and DPP's Taiwan Independence Clause, OK, in Chinese， 就是您的维持现状这种说法和民进党的台独党纲之间究竟是什么关系？谢谢。
Right. Believe it or not, I have anticipated your question as well. The answer is all there.
Not being able to answer to the 1992 consensus was her weakness in the 2012 campaign, so she dealt with the issue by simply saying, "I've already referred to that issue," when in fact she didn't.
We will be posting Dr. Tsai's speech on our website, so you can go back and study it carefully. I want to thank you all for coming. Please join me in thanking Dr. Tsai Ing-wen.
So Tsai and her team went to the State Department, while the Taiwan media followed her around. In my opinion, Tsai Ing-wen is an international embarrassment to Taiwan. Going to the United States and being received at these kinds of talks and calling herself a professor is truly an embarrassment to Taiwan, given that she most likely does not have a PhD from LSE, passing herself off as an educated person when in fact her real skill is conning people about who she really is. In addition to covering up the fact that she rigged her re-election, the thing that she fears the most is people finding out that she's not an actual PhD holder. She will cover this up for as long as she can because she will be facing criminal charges one day if it comes out that she did not actually complete her PhD at LSE in 1984.